Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the last speed talk of this series of this year. Today we have the pleasure to talk with the architect and professor Donatella Fioretti, who is leading, as you know, one of the classes of the workshop. Her career is divided between design, research, and teaching. I will just give you a very short introduction, and then we will leave the most of the time for a direct presentation of her works. She graduated in Italy at the Istituto Universitario di Architettura di Venezia, and she worked also with the Swiss architect Peter Zumthor. And then in 1995, she founded a private practice in Berlin, Bruno Fioretti Markets Architekten, with the two colleagues and friends, Piero Bruno and Jose Gutierrez Markets. And in 2009, they also opened a second office in Lugano. Devoted to architecture and urbanism, they design and realize a wide range of buildings for international clients, from cultural spaces as library and museum, to kindergarten, schools and university, to administrative buildings, to residential building. And they have a very specific involvement in the conversion of historic buildings, some of which are listed as UNESCO World Heritage sites, and these give a very specific commitment to their work. They deal with economic, social, energy, design, and technical constraint, always keeping an eye on functionality and originality, and always looking for a compromise between science, technology, and art. These are the three keywords of their work. Their projects are defined from an urban and architectural scales up to the details, with specific attention to material and energy saving aspects. They won awards for design excellence, among which, just to name some of them, the German Architecture Prize, the Hugo Ehring Prize, the DBA Prize Berlin, the Detail Special Award, the German Brick Award, and many of their projects have been winning international competition and have been published on journals and presented in exhibition, and they were also twice nominated for the Miss Van der Rohe Award. And from this year, Donatella is also member of the Design Forum in Leipzig. Concerning from the point of view of research, she is currently involved in a project that is called Monolithic, in cooperation between different universities, TU Berlin, Weimar, Bauhaus, and the universities of applied sciences in München and in Lausanne. And this research project, aims at combining sustainability on one side and simplicity on the other in building technologies, adopting an open and interdisciplinary perspective. And she considers academic commitment to be complementary to design activities, and she has a long career in teaching and in the academic field. And since 1996, she has been teaching, starting with giving lectures, seminars, and summer schools in different European and American university. And she became research assistant and then visiting professor in 2004 and then full professor in 2011 for design and construction at the Technical University of Berlin. And she's currently full professor appointed to the chair of Baukunst at the Kunstakademie of Düsseldorf since 2017. If you can close your microphone, okay. In different occasions, as a professor, Donatella defined teaching as a complex exchange between teachers and students, and I think this workshop is a good example of this dynamic. She's convinced that looking at a location or to a project through the eyes of the students coming from different cultures and from different also contexts in education could mean questioning the design methods and the knowledge itself, while finding new ways of explaining some of the fundamentals of architectures could mean to redefine her own knowledge and perspective in the field. Maybe since we have a lot of students in the audience, we could expand a little bit on this aspect of the meaning of teaching in a design school and course in the final discussion. And she also established a design-based PhD in architecture and landscape architecture that could be an interesting field for the discussion. I now leave the floor to Donatella Fioretti for a description of her work in the first person. And I ask all of you to keep the microphone muted and to raise your hand or to write in the chat if you have some questions or doubt, and then we will keep some minutes in the end for direct questions. Thanks. Donatella, if you want to start.
Nicole, thank you very much. It was very specific. Thank you very much for the introduction. I think I don't need to speak anymore now. You tell a lot already. So actually, it's really like this. So first of all, I'm really sorry because my English is not as fluently as maybe other languages, and so you have to endure my Teutonic accent, and I mix all the time with the English and German, so it's a little bit complicated. So sorry for the inconvenience. So when I was just gathering some thought about this talk, I could become aware that I founded my practice 25 years ago, and in the same year I began to teaching, and that's of course there was the possibility to teaching was the possibility to start my own practice with Piero Bruno and Jose Gutierrez Marquez, and this relationship, as you said, in between design, building, teaching, and researching is very present in and very close to my work as an architect. It means I learned to design and to build together with teaching and researching. So my experience as an architect flow into teaching, but not just in a obvious direction, but also in another direction. So it means that, so of course, it's a little bit seems a little bit cheesy, but it's really like this. I learned a lot from the student because you have this multiple perspective when you are teaching, and so to see the problem through the eye of different students is really quite interesting. So it takes you away from your own automatism, and so it's really it's really interesting and great. So I really would like to share some thoughts with you, and maybe next, Gianluca. So I share some. I'm a passionate reader, and so there is some authors that I love very much, and one of them is Brodsky. And Brodsky said poetry is a tremendous school of insecurity and uncertainty, and I think that's working as an architect means constantly finding a balance between security and uncertainty, doubt and conviction. And doubt is not to be understood as a mere obstacle or handicap, but as a method, the programmatic doubt as an instrument of knowledge to stay alert and flexible. And that's, I think that is very important to address this issue with the student, because when I was learning, when I was studying in Venice, I had the impression that our professors were so extremely secure. And next. And I think that could be this beautiful picture could be a fantastic example of this of our, so quite existential. So it's an illustration for Lewis Carroll, The Hunting of the Snark, and it's a fantastic illustration. It's the oceans chart. And it's just so quite existential representation of our situation, but also as our situation as an architect. So there's the white sheet as a possibility, and also as a big, difficult problem. Maybe another quote next. That's I like very much. I was very pleased that Hervé showed us some quote of Paul Valéry. That is a writer that I also like very much. And that is about a discussion between Degas and Mallarmé. Mallarmé was one of the most important poets of his generation. And Degas was discussing poetry with Mallarmé. And he told, it isn't idea I'm short of. I've got too many, say Degas. But Degas, replied Mallarmé, you can't make a poem with idea, you make it with words. And that's, I think that's just very important for our work. So if you can transpose this idea from poetry to architecture, I think that is very important, because of course you don't make architecture with the concept. Words in poetry are not neutral, are not transparent, they have a weight, they have a sound, they generate echoes and memories, and just because the opacity and the murkiness, they can react poetically. And so it's actually it's the same in architecture. So the different way you build a wall, a window, a roof could be considered the equivalent in architecture of words in literature. So it's so that is why the title of this small talk it's lost in translation, because it's really, you can lose your concept in the translation when you build it, and this process of translating is so important, it's so difficult, and it's full of joy, and it's a very fantastic moment. But it's very important that we understand that this translation is a very important aspect of our work as an architect. So next. As Nicole already said, the work of our students are mostly result of public competition with a wide and heterogeneous spectrum of cultural, educational, and residential projects. We are working mostly with the public institution, and we have a very few private clients. That's not just happened, that was really a decision from our side. And because we, so it's a little naive, I think, but when I finished my university, I really wanted to build for most of all library. I spent a lot of time in different beautiful library in Venice. I've always been fascinated from these spaces, and I think that's yes, in a way, I take the social task of the architect very seriously. I think that's as trivial as it seems, public buildings are the royal path of architecture. And that was a very important decision for me, because I worked during my study time. I worked in Italy, I worked in Germany, and I work in Switzerland. And I find it very difficult to think the possibility of working at this kind of project in Italy, and so I have to decide to go to Germany, to first in Switzerland. I work with Peter Zumthor, and then to Germany next. So. Of course, I will not talk in this, so I will not show in detail in this presentation. I will not show you some project in detail. I just want to talk about some topic we are working with at the moment. And so maybe mostly so our work is in architecture. So because we are working with a lot of competition, we have the possibility to think about to be confronted with different thematic, with different question. And one of these is, for instance, the question that's so we made in the late years some competition for school and libraries, and as we know, or as everybody knows, it's the way in which knowledge is understood and conveyed is fundamental to understand the society. That is obvious. You can almost write a history of a society just looking how a society preserves, conveys memories, and how a society understands the teaching. We notice that the way in which knowledge is understood and conveyed in our society has changed fundamentally in recent years. And I mean, that is the perfect example of what I'm talking about. The library, it's a perfect example for this. Why are the libraries so interesting from the architect's point of view? One of the reasons should that they present a very faithful representation of the knowledge understanding of a society. You can look over centuries, libraries of antiquity, of Middle Age, of Renaissance, Baroque. In every library, you can read in the room of each library, observe how a certain society stands for knowledge transferred. Who produces knowledge, what kind of knowledge is valued, who has access to knowledge. So every epoch has produced his own library, and they can be very different, but they have something common, and they are great space normally. And in the last few years, the idea of library has changed completely. Books are no longer play a privileged role. Other media have become very important. The libraries are open 24 hours in a 7 days in the week. And other activities have become very important, like so a bar, a workshop, music studio, co-working, fab labs. So in a way, the library are become the ultimate public room, the ultimate public space. They are authentic public space, one of the less space where you don't need to consume to be there. And then there is, of course, a sort of paradox of digitalization that despite the increasing virtual media consume, people have a sort of longing for real spaces. Visitor numbers in public libraries are a clear upward trend. Seats are rare, event full booked. The number of visitors has never been higher. Next, and then I go to show you some project. Next. Okay, that's maybe I skipped this. Library is a third space. It's a very nice definition of Rai Oldenburg. That's so first space being the housing, the second space being the working, and the third space it's a place to relax in public and to stay together, to interact with other people. So I will show you a project that's a library that we won, a competition that we won last year, and we are going to build, hopefully. That is in Mannheim. Next. So the question is that I think that we are struggling in finding a typology for library that are as compelling and as strong as the traditional library. So we have some example. We have some example now from different architects, but sometimes some of them, they are trying to make a sort of big gesture, or maybe a sort of so it's a sort of reinterpretation of a generic space, like for instance a mall, so a shopping mall. And I think that's just so it's very difficult to find a project. So we have some exception. I mean, Sebastian, for instance, I think I didn't know your project. Really very interesting. But I think that's so a little bit we are struggling in finding the likeliness of the quality of the specific atmosphere of a classic library. So we have the opportunity to reflect about this aspect in this project. That is the city. You see the plan of the city of Mannheim. That is the plan is the Baroque plan. And if you see very strong structure, and Mannheim was almost completely destroyed during the war, and but it maintains this Baroque structure. So next. Okay, so as you can see, a lot of new building of the 50s, of the 60s. It's not a fantastic, beautiful city, let's say. And the place where we intend to, we are supposed to build, it's this part on the right side, and it's and the moment there is a garage, and so next. On the place of the garage, we put our new library. And the idea is, of course, is that we not intend to confront the urban structure, but just to confirm this city plan. Next. So this project is mostly to understand in section, and we were looking for a strategy to that allows us openness, flexibility, sustainability, which is a big challenge in this time, as we all know, and at the same time identity, specificity, and a sort of toughness, or let's say a sort of robustness, which can endure the change over time and nevertheless maintain his character. So we thought that was very important to find a structure which could maintain an idea of identity, of specificity, and at the same time to allow this flexibility and openness. So next. A very important reference was the Palazzo della Ragione in Padua, with this transparent and very permeable ground floor and a structure above. Next. So as you can see, we have four, I don't think that is the right translation, mushroom structure. So in Italian, so una struttura fungo, in German, Pilzstruktur. I don't know if it's the right traduction in a translation in English, but you have a structure, so four pillars in concrete, which contain all the secondary function, the stair, the lift, the shafts, all the technique, etc. And above, which can offer a perfect container for earth. We have a big garden on the roof, and there was a specific request of the briefing of the competition. And from this big element, we suspended a construction, a wood construction. Next. So that is the element, so the four pillars for mushroom construction, and then the element, the hanging wood construction. Next. So here, can you see in the section underneath there was also a garage. Next. We have a big staircase, an open staircase, which is also almost a space, which go from which unite a different floor. Next. And then you see here, so the four element, which allow a very flexible room that can change in the time. That is the ground floor, can change in the time, so it's not specific in the distribution of the function. Next. So the same idea, so in a way the same situation you can find in the next floors. Next. So here the structure, the section, the detail. That is maybe I have to say that it's also a very important aspect of our work. We are working at the beginning of every competition, but also at the beginning of every project with structural engineer and with the specialists for system, for facility, I don't know what's, for technical building equipment. And in this case, we're trying to work with the really good, so they are as important as the architect. So I think that's at the moment there is no way to work alone as an architect. You have to have your team very, very good engineer. And this work, for instance, we work together with the Transolar. We make a fantastic concept, energy concept. And with the office from structural engineer Pushkas, Schnetzker and Pushkas, which are, in my opinion, one of the most interesting structural engineer in Europe. They are working with a lot of Swiss architects, and it's really incredible. It's extremely, you can notice when you work with this kind of engineer, their work, it's exactly creative as our work as an architect. And next. So you can see some images of the model. We are working a lot with model because model it's really at the beginning, but that was model we were doing during the competition, because a model is really a way to understand the spaces. Next. Okay, that is the staircase between the different spaces. Next. And that is the upper floor, where you can see, you can perceive the dimension, the form of this big pillar, and the muscle. You can say. Next. So I was talking before that so the way how we understand knowledge, how we understand how to convey knowledge is changing in the last time, at the present day, and it's also changing consequently the way we are teaching. The way we are intending teaching. So the idea, next. Okay, so that's, I will not translate this German text, but the way we are intending teaching is changing. So the way to convey teaching. So the frontal lesson will be less important. There is a different way to teach. So there is teaching a small group, they're teaching in all together in bigger group. There is a teaching form in small project and so on. And mostly of our schoolroom are not able to respond to this different requests from the program. So in this competition that we won in Berlin a couple of years ago, I just show you that now we had another competition, so we are doing we're in the process of making a modular school, but it's a work in progress. I could not present you, but in this project is a very similar idea. So we were seeking also for a way to have a structure that could help us to make some flexible structure that could allow us to give different kind of spaces for the teaching. So the first idea, the first reference was a very typical space in Berlin, which is the Fabric Taj. So it's came with the invention of the lift. And actually, you find it in every place in Berlin, in Kreuzberg, Friedrichshain, everywhere. You have the first in the street, you have a residential unit normally, and then you have on the backyard, you have a lot of these kind of spaces, which are actually like a workshop, staple one on another. And it's in a way, it's very specific and very generic, and it's in quite interesting spaces. Next. Next. So in this case, we had a very small plot, but because in Berlin there is a big school, so they are trying to build, I think, 80 school in the next 5 years, and they are looking for all the plot they can find to build to have a school, to build a school. This was a very small one because the external part is also very important. So the external, the sports places, they are very important for the school. Next. And so also this project is better understanding in a section. So next. It's a grid principally. And we have, so on the left and right, you have the classroom. In the middle also, so library and different kind of workshop. And between the workshop and the classroom, you have very big, so as big as the classroom, very big spaces, which are distribution spaces, but also are spaces where you can learn informally, and you can have different possibility of learning and interact. We also integrate the sport facility in the ground floor. You can see it on the right. It's the gymnastic halle. And we use, because it was really a problem of to use as less space as possible. So we use the floor before above for the structure. So for the structure of the sport facility, of the sport room, and so that we don't need, so we can use every space of this. So the space, the structure is also a space that we use for our program. Next. Okay, also here a very flexible space. And the next. And this is the problem when you intend to use this kind of so you try to use the corridor as a teaching space. You have a lot of problem that has to do with fire security and of course structural problem. And so we solved this problem with a balcony, a gang for the foyer escape, but also as a room. Next. 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 And so that is so. Oh. That is the idea of the school, and now we are working with a very similar principle for 7 schools around Berlin. Next. In a very similar way, we worked with the kindergarten. And that was in Switzerland, in Lugano. Next. So the idea that is in a place in Lugano. So on the left side you have the historical city. On the right side it's where the kindergarten was built. Is the part of the 1970 city, the city of the 90s. So next. Shows a very typical structure. So it's like a sort of compromise between the city of block and the modern idea of the city, with the green and with the building on the green. And so actually the problem is that this kind of city propose maybe a lot of junk spaces. Not all spaces are really well thought or well done. So, but I just want to next. So that is the situation. Okay, next. That is so maybe I don't go too much on the question of the urban structure. So we have to complete this block, and on the right side we have school, and we completed the school with a sort of converted playground. And on the left side, there is the kindergarten. Next. So every the two building has so the existing school is completed with this covered playground. On the other side, there is the entrance of the school and of the kindergarten, and in front of the kindergarten, from this side, you see a playground. Next. The building is a one-floor building. It's we think that for kindergarten, that's one floor solution is a very good one. And we decide to work with this building with an idea, which is so we try to bring together, to put together the distribution and the spaces of the classroom. So we worked next. Okay, that is just the covered playground. Next. It's a structure, it's a concrete structure. It's very different, completely different in the idea from the kindergarten. Next. Next. And next. And, but I want to talk with you about the kindergarten. And so next. A very important reference for us was this beautiful building of Sharon for the Geschwister School Gymnasium in Lünen. And that is, as you can see in this building, Sharon is working with the space, very much with the space in the definition of the space in between. So creating a very interesting graduation in the privacy. So from the privacy of the room, there is then a sort of space for the entrance in the classroom. And you also have a sort of a garden, open garden that's it's considered like a sort of room, of open room. But it's quite interesting, so how the room came in another. So next. So we use a sort of a principle which is known in the mathematics, so the geometry. It's a tessellation of a flat surface, is the covering of a plane using one or more geometric shapes. So let's say tiles, with no overlaps or no gaps. In mathematics, tessellation can be generalized to higher dimension and a variety of geometries. But this idea was was used a lot next. So that is some example of tessellation, and there was very much used in architecture. Next. That is very typical for Alhambra, so the beautiful tiles of Alhambra become in another. And so we try to work with the sort of tessellation, with a very simple one in comparison to this, for instance. Next. And so you see the grid, the initial grid, which is made from a module. So actually 4 different modules. And next. That is the principle of the work. So we have a 5 unit, 5 teachings unit, and every unit is composed in 5 different rooms. So in 5 different modules, then put together form the unit. That is so you see the module at the beginning, and then the first classroom. Next. And then you see the different classroom. They come together, they are put together in a different way so that you have a sort of differentiation in the uniformity of this grid. And you have every time you have a different situation through the light, but also the classroom is functioning a little bit different, but of course it's always the same room, just composing different together. Next. So that's so the part of we were working, as I already said, with model during the competition, just to understand the structure of these elements. Next. Of course, this kind of moving the wall has some quite interesting for the aspect of the acoustic, which is very important in kindergarten. So that is the photo that we give instead of the perspective. Next. Photo of the model. Next. And of course was for us very important that the room that's directly to connect it with the units has to be a sort of a protected room. The stereo room was like considered like the sixth room of this composition. Next. And so you see from the right, you can enter the kindergarten, and there is a big floor space. It's it's not a floor, it's not a corridor, it's really a space. It's a space that you can use in summer for to play. It's a space that you can use for, and they use it. That's what was quite interesting. You can use it for a sort of marked. You can use for assembly. You can use for a different function. And as you can see, there is no distinction between corridor and the space in itself. Next. We decide to sign the entrance just to make a small deformation on the entrance, because on the first floor there is some spaces for the administration, and also will be a nice way to signalize the entrance. Next. 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 And next. Okay, that's you see the section, and next. We go maybe in the construction. Okay, this is the idea of construction. We are working with what's the name? Laminated veneer lumber. So with very big slab of timber. So almost massive. It's a very strange way to work, because all the tectonic of the classic tectonic of timber is questioned. So we have a concrete basement, and then wall and opening. Next. So we can go ground plate. Next. Next. So the part above we use. Okay. Next. Can choose next. Next. Okay, you can see in this construction site photos, you see how we use a sort of not tectonic way to work with the wood. So we cut the wood structure, and we put there the beams. Next. Next. Was quite interesting. No, sorry. It was quite interesting because it seems a little bit complicated, but actually every module is the same. Was of course you have to work with the digitalized cutting machine, but it's now normal in every production, wood production. And but it was quite nice how precise you can put this element in the element. It's just almost working with the cardboard. It's quite interesting. Next, so interesting the possibility that you can have with this kind of not more so new material. So that's during the construction site. Next. So some. And then it's we decide to have overall wood also in the roof. It's quite a complicated detail, but it's possible. Next. And so, as you can see, this continuity of space between the interior and the exterior. So we wanted always to make some photo with children because we did it before they use it, and now we need absolutely to make photo with children, but it's always a little bit complicated. Next. Next. So that is, for instance, the space between, that is also the major distribution, but also a place that they use really a lot. So as a playground, as for different event, also for the community. Next. And this is the room, the interior, and we decide not to use color, just to use a very thin sheet of color that you can see the texture of the wood, but not cover it. But we also don't want to use color, other kind of colors. It's almost white, because we thought that the children will be the color there, and they are drawing and so on. Next. So, and that is the last thing I show you, was just a sort of reinterpretation of this principle of the tessellation. Next. As was a competition in also in Berlin, and we followed this principle. Was a well, now it's not so important. Next. So it was a really small plot, and we decided to work with this kind of room, with the idea to have a continuity of with this kind of geometry. And it was quite interesting, because it was this, so we can solve all the program, but also was the smallest one. So it's let's say the relationship between net and gross space is very convenient. So it's quite interesting. Next. And the next. Next. So that is the idea of this space. Next. And maybe I already talked too much, so I just want to end this conversation. Thank you for your patience with this beautiful quote from Virginia Woolf from To the Lighthouse, also one of my love, as I love her very much. Beautiful and bright should be on the surface, feathery and evanescent, one color melting into another like the color of a butterfly wing. But beneath the fabric must be clamped together with bolt of iron. It was to be a thing you can ruffle with your breath, and a thing you could not dislodge with a team of horses. And that's, for me, it's the dichotomy we are working with in architecture. So you have to follow the fragility of the idea, of the concept. You have to work with and to make it, you have to work with the bolt of irons. And I think that's at the moment, so the architecture, our work of making architecture is it's very difficult. So I working since 25 years, and it's so it's really difficult to, it's always more complicated, and you have more laws, you have more, the question of sustainability make it very complex. You have a new regulation and so on, and you have a lot of question from the society, from the public, and it makes it's really difficult to work with something that is so feathery and evanescent like an idea, and it's very difficult to transport this idea through the project of to the process of construction, and it's and so I think that's it's a beautiful way to put it. So in a way, our drama, our joy, and so on. Thank you for your attention. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Donatella, for your presentation. I think also the example that you have chosen are really highlighting some core point of your work. I would maybe leave the stage for some question, if we have in the public. You can raise your hand or open your webcam and microphone. I start maybe with a comment. I particularly appreciated the selection of project that you proposed, because they are all highlighting this collaboration between science, technology, and art that you were mentioning at the beginning. And this tool of tessellation, I think it's a very good example of some perspective that belongs to different disciplines, but that can be an occasion to put the different perspective in dialogue. I don't know if Camillo, you want to?
Yeah, I prefer if there are some students, or okay, I try. I would like only. Thanks a lot, Donatella. Thanks a lot for your presentation, and I would like only to share a consideration about your work. I appreciate a lot the relationship in all the different projects that you show us, the strong relationship between form and structure. That I think that is a crucial point in your project. And it's also quite interesting to consider that you try to develop this specific research considering also different materials. Sometimes it is the concrete, how to use mushroom structure. I mean,
I don't know.
I don't know.
But we understand each other.
Also in this last project, how you use the X-cross timber, the wood structure. Yeah. And I mean, it's a way to test different material, different structure, and at the end, a very different shape, form that arrive from the same research that is around this strong relationship, structure and form. And I appreciate a lot also how you use the model as a tools to investigate this relationship. And I'm, of course, it will be better, not better, I mean, it will be great try to test also with the students this approach, physical approach to use the model. So it's not a question, it was only a consideration. And so, thanks.
Thank you, Camillo. Now, the question that the projects are quite different, and it's of course we were no interested in looking for a language, an architectural language, and so we're more interested in a method or in a
approach,
in a possibility. So it's that's to think that a project is really an answer to a situation, to a program, to a material, and so on. So I think that we have so many possibilities now in architecture. So it's the idea to have a language, an architectural language, was no a question for us.
Okay. Are there some other questions from the students?
Yeah, maybe I can do a question or comment.
Yeah.
Please.
Yeah. No, first of all, thanks for your inspiring lecture. I like it very much, and I like it. I mean, the balance between very precise intellectual discourse and projects that I think embedded that precision as well. I don't know if this is a question or maybe it's a curiosity, or maybe there are two questions. Since you are looks a very reflexive person, what it means for you coming from, let's say, a Catholic tradition, if one can say that, to work in a Protestant world, no? What have this meant for you? And second question, probably related with that. Why
Nice
all the
question.
pictures are black and white? No, I always have been curious about this sort of, yeah.
No, it's a nice question. Which was the second question?
No, it was much more a curiosity. Why you choose?
Yeah, no, I like
every picture black and
I like
white.
to answer. No, it's complicated sometimes, but so one thing maybe in Germany, it's to be. So we are, of course, a sort of privilege foreigners, because it's not the same maybe to be a refugee or so. It's very different. But they are not so. They are quite open, especially in Berlin with foreign, and so that is quite nice. Of course, you have to. So it's a way to think. I mean, in Switzerland, is even stronger this Protestant way to think and to work. It's really hard, and in a way, I love the precision. I love the way how they are working. So let's say the artisans are fantastic, and they're extremely competent, and that's something that I love very much. I don't like the rigidity. This is very complicated to work with, and you move yourself in a sort of forest of legislation. That's you cannot just say okay, but maybe it's not so. It's really so you have to work with it, and so for instance, we did this. Kindergarten in Switzerland, and I mean Tessin is already the Italian part. So in comparison to Germany, to Swiss Germany, it's something. It's another word, but we have this one one store kindergarten, we had like, I don't know, 14 meters of document but more, no? So any quantity is an incredible quantity. And so, yes, it's difficult, but in a moment so we are the one who discussed always the legislation in a way, because, you know, at the moment, if you want to build it in a certain way, the standards are really deadly. So if you want to build in a good way, you have to discuss the standard, because someone they are really arbitrary and they are really stupid. Something are very understandable, but sometimes you have really to discuss it. And we, for instance, we could build a library in bricks without insulation, just using the depth of the wall. And so we work with the insulated concrete, but it was always like a fight. It's a big fight. And I made sometime a talk. The name is Manuale di Riverenza. So it's sort of how you don't have to take the rules so seriously. This is very important, not to take the rule very seriously. And it was, I didn't think about it, but it was a shock. Every time there was a discussion at the end of the talk, it was incredible. But it's really interesting. It's really interesting. And the cooking is not so good in the Protestant place.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. I don't know, maybe we have time for just one last question.
If I can, Nicole,
Sure.
I would like to ask you something, Donatella. Thank you for the great presentation. I appreciate a lot your projects. And just a simple question is if you can explain the difference between tessellation and modularity. Because I understand that is another thing, but I think that should be interesting to stress a little this concept of tessellation in comparison with the more routinary concept of modularity. Then, because I also agree with Camillo that the relationship between form and structure it's absolutely crucial. I think that is not very Italian, is not very Catholic in a way, because maybe in Italian or Mediterranean or Catholic architecture, form is more important than the structure. No? And I think that in your design, this perfect integration, no? Having an architectural imagination that is also a structural imagination is really a very important lesson for students and for everybody, but is really something that we don't see every day. And also in a more rational way, also in comparison with many Swiss and or Northern architects that work a lot with structure, but stressing the concept of the structure. No? But I think you have a perfect balance between the two components of architectural imagination.
So, to answer your question about modularity and the tessellation, I think that's the modularity is the general case of tessellation. Tessellation is a more specific aspect of modularity. But it's quite interesting because tessellation you cannot do with so there are just specific form which is possible to work with tessellation. So, for instance, you have maybe 4 cases with the square, and so not with the square, with the parallelepipedo, and I not remember with the pentagon you have maybe a little more, but it's quite interesting that you have so it's very limited the possibility to make a tessellation. It's limited but also big. And no, was a nice discover for us this principle. I mean, we are not the first one, no, of course, but it was interesting to work with.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks. I think we are a little bit over time already, so we should conclude.
The
To let
student
the
has to
students,
work.
yes, come back to their work. But thank you for the presentation and for the interesting comments and questions. I think we really had a good time. Now the students have to come back to work, but I think they could have a lot of inspiration from this speed talk. Thank you everyone for attending, and to Donatella for the presentation and the inspiration.
Thank you very much for the
Thank you.
invitation. And my students, we are going to talk further. Yeah, see you in our room.
Thanks. Ciao,
Thank
ciao.
you. Thank you,
Bye.
everyone.
Ciao.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you.
Thank you.
Ciao. Bye bye.
Thank you.